Coming up with 30 games left to go, where do we stand on the Brooklyn Nets? Jordi Fernandez, expectations for the players left in Brooklyn, and where do we think they're ultimately going to finish when it comes to those sweet, sweet Tankathon odds? We set it all up for you coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, rated on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marmick. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen today. We're 100% free on all those great platforms, and reminds you can get newsletters from everybody across the Locked On Network, lockedondaily.com. And I should remind people that you can also go check out the squad shows, East and West, hosted by Nick Angstad, hosted by Sean Woodley. Really good roundtable discussions. A lot of fun. Those are popping up on Tuesday evenings. Okay. Hi, Doug. I guess you're here for the show as well. Let's talk about the final 30 games for Brooklyn as we set some expectations now that we're through the deadline and all the dust has settled.
Yeah, look, they win again on Friday night against the Heat, kind of easily. So, of course, this can't go anyway. Easily because they use a 31-9 fourth. Yeah, 31-9. The Heat look like the Heat were like, maybe they're tanking. 9 freaking points in the fourth quarter where they're able to pull away. And, in the end, we just get to this situation where it's a very, very difficult team to try to figure out on a night-to-night basis. They've clearly exceeded expectations. The way the lottery odds smooth, it's like not the worst thing in the world to be where they are at 6th. You'd like to have a 14% chance instead of 9. Clearly, like 5% matters when Cooper Flagg's the guy. So
sure.
I struggle sometimes when people don't understand that, but whatever. But I mean, they just are where they are now. So making judgments around these last 30 games, this team plays hard every night. The starting lineup is not a world beater, but it's definitely competent, right? Like that's the lineup they put out there last night is a competent lineup. And I just think we're probably in to finish. Well, I don't know. I mean, they're just going to blow away their preseason win expectation, right? Like, pretty easily, and I think we're going to see a lot of the same over these last 30 games.
2-17 over the previous 19 games, and then making no changes to the roster, actually getting rid of guys in a buyout with Ben Simmons. They've won 4 out of their last 5, and that's exactly how you draw it up. And we've heard people talk about what is the expectations now? Is Jordi Fernandez and his impact on this roster starting to come around? We'll get into some of the numbers here from a team standpoint, areas that they're succeeding. But you mentioned it, for everything that's gone on here, the fact that they're going to end up clearly blowing past their over-under at the start of the year. It is a credit, I believe, to Sean Marks. Sean Marks, I know people are going to hate that. It's a credit to Jordi Fernandez with what he's done with this roster to this point. And I do caution fans around, if you're thinking that this team is turning a bit of a corner and is going to start getting some wins here, just remember, they beat Charlotte. Yes, the games against Houston were good. And by the way, if any coach is going to be in that group that gets kind of pissed off by another coach's remarks about his squad and go make a statement, it's Jordi Fernandez. So they beat Houston twice, and I get that. They also lost to Washington before beating Miami. The schedule coming for them has all the teams that are going to want to get some wins. It also has some of the trash ones, like the Hornets again, like the Wizards, but the Cavs are in there, the 76ers twice that need victories. You're going to get the Spurs and their new version. You're going to get Golden State. It's just, we could be back in a blink here talking about the team going 5-10, 4-11 over the next 15 games, potentially in the blink of an eye. So nothing's dramatically changed for me to this point, in spite of this little blip that they've had here over these last handful of games. Does that track for you?
No. Oh, for sure. I don't think they'll make the playoffs or anything. I'm saying the dreams of, if you were dreaming about getting into this like top 3 group, right, where the lottery odds are like essentially
a little bit better
chance.
Yeah.
With the 14% chance of hitting number 1. I'll just go through right now. It's 14% chance. 1 through 3 is 14% chance to hit number 1. The 4th seed is a 12.5% chance. 5th, 10.5, 9, 6th, 9% chance, and 7.5. Then it keeps going down. And yeah, I get the part where, I think they're going to end up closer to like these middle seeds than these top 3. Like if they're not hitting this 14% chance, like I think that dream is all the way dead. They would have to basically lose every game from here on out. And even then I think it might be tough. right? With how some of these other teams are rolling on a night-to-night basis. So they could probably do it, and it would still probably be close. So I think the part where they're getting to that top 3 group, which again, you really want to be like when Cooper Flag's there, you want a 5% extra chance at hitting Cooper Flag. Like I hate to tell you, I know everyone that I see that argues against this is like either doesn't understand math or doesn't understand how good Cooper Flag is, like, or both. like there's a chance that both, there's a chance, there's a chance that both things are happening. It's like, hey, when this guy comes around, yeah, every percentage counts. Like I want 5% interest rates better than, or 14% interest rates better than a 9% interest rate. Like we'd all take it. I mean, unless it's on your mortgage. Like, so it's like one of these things where it does matter. That being said, it just doesn't, like, they're just not getting there anyway. So at this point, I don't think they're making the playoffs, but I do think that they're still going to stick around in this seating area. That's going to be a disappointment for a lot of fans. And I think that rightfully so. I think that this is one of those like rightfully so sort of things. And it just is what it is.
I find that part of it fascinating because I agree with you that you want the better percentages. You always want that. And when you're talking about the Cooper Flag, and by the way, just if you look at the board, you go, or if it's going to be, Harper, or if it's going to be Ace Bailey, like you just want to have the best chances to get the best player that you could possibly get. I 100% agree with it, but I will say, I always come back to this idea though, that when you look at the percentages, everyone, it's like the two ends of the spectrum. The people that are saying, it doesn't really matter, extra 5% is not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. And then the other side of it is, well, the way that the odds play themselves out, like 14% chance to get the first overall pick. The difference of the 5% is, well, because you are second in record and therefore have the 14% chance, that means you're getting second overall, means you're getting third, means you're getting fourth. That's also not true. It's part of these flattened odds that's supposed to make things better. And when you look back over the history of it, it's not the team with the worst odds, with the worst record and the best odds that more often than not comes out with the number 1 pick or that ends up filling out the board at the top of the draft as we've seen in years past. So I don't know what I make of it short of that has already passed, to your point. That dream is dead of being the Washington Wizards, just totally at the dumpster. No one can catch you. And I think it probably ends up coming out in the wash in the end. I know you're going to push back on that, and we can get into it in a second.
No, I'm actually not going to. I won't cut you off, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to push all the way back on it. Keep going. Sorry.
Okay. No, because ultimately, I think the value of what Jordi Fernandez is accomplishing this year matters. We're going to talk about the development of certain players and what we want to watch for going forward. And because they don't get one of the top 4 picks, it doesn't mean they pick 30th. They're still going to have some really good picks throughout the course of a very deep draft class. And I think if we fast forward to 2 years from now, we'll still be having a very healthy conversation about where this franchise is, as difficult as it may feel right now to know that the Cooper Flag dream is far further away than you wanted it to be. Let's have Doug not push back so much coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at OpenPhone. Look, running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone. I know what this is like. And before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day, all night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. You can't do it, folks. It's where OpenPhone comes in. #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate for just $15 a month. That's the cost of a few coffees. You get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. OpenPhone works through an app on your phone or computer, integrates with tools like HubSpot, like to hear that, or hundreds of others. It's also AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you have a rundown of your calls and action items. The second you hang up, miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off your first 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right. So as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about what does the rest of this season look like? And in some ways, what is the future going forward for Brooklyn? I'll add on this thing before you can give your, to whatever degree, pushback on it. It's also this other thing that I think people forget about too. Okay, so Brooklyn is 6th overall in the standings, and they have a 9% chance for the #1 overall pick. Let's say they don't get the #1 overall pick. Now they have a better percentage chance of getting the second overall pick, and then the better percent chance of getting the third. Like, the percentage numbers start to play into your favor as you take one off. You didn't get that, but you're still one of the better teams that has a better chance to land the next best available pick. And that top 4 category, I think, is always important to mention here. And I said this before, I would prefer that instead of being at 37.2, yes, 42.1 just sounds a lot sweeter. It feels a lot more robust. But you still have a better than 37% chance to be in that top 4 category, even if you sit outside of it. Please go ahead.
Well, the math gets fuzzy when you're like, well, is the 5% chance at Cooper Flag better than the X% chance that your organization is rudderless and looks like, with a coach that has no respect and everyone's just playing hero ball and everyone's out to get theirs and gunning for a contract? Like, I don't know. I'm sure there's probably some kind of math that exists around that. I still think I'd probably want Flag in the end, but overall, there is like an organizational signal that you send that's worth something. Like, it's definitely not worth nothing to like have a team that looks like it's run well, to clearly have hit on a coach 100%, right? To have veteran guys that can help some of the young guys. We're gonna have a lot of younger guys in the building here in the next couple of years, to have veterans that can kind of like be stewards of that process, like sort of passing along the torch. Those things are for sure important. It's just one of these things where, like, when you butt up against generational talent,
of course,
I'll tell you right now, if it's generational talent, those are the guys that last 20 years in the league and win championships. And we've talked about this many times. Flag might not be the guy. We've seen plenty of number one guys not be the guy. So it's not a lock. I will tell you, when you look at the best players in the league, there's a lot of number one picks up there. And a lot of times the best players are the number one picks. Not always. I know everyone's going to comment. Please put Jokic and Giannis in the comments. I get it. Like, there's other guys. But by and large, if you look at the group of players, the top 50 in the league, the mode for that group, i.e. the number draft pick that shows up the most, is number one pick, right? And where that's worth on the percentage spectrum, I'm not really sure. So no, I don't think it's like the clearest thing ever to just say, hey, be awful for that extra 5% chance is what we're saying. Like, be unwatchable for the extra 5% chance. But I don't know. Like, it's not nothing. The math is hard. I don't know. It's an inexact science. You just need these guys in the end. And hey, there might be 2 or 3 of these guys in the draft that aren't Cooper Flag. We've seen this happen time and again too.
Right.
It's not a sure thing. It's just sometimes it feels pretty sure. Like, man, that's the kind of guy. That's the kind of guy he feels like.
But it feels kind of like a guarantee. And so the other part of it is too, because if you're a Washington Wizards fan, are you bullish that when you get Cooper Flag, that your organization is ready to take that superstar talent and make all the right decisions and execute properly and put yourself in a spot to win championships, where you're not having the Anthony Davis conversation that the Pelicans had years ago, right? Like, hey, this has been awesome. I don't want to stay here. And by the way, you'd still rather have the superstar talent and try to see if you can keep them than to lose them potentially. And there's all the mechanics that try to make it more favorable to hold on to those players. From a Nets perspective, I do think about this because we talked about coaching before and what a mess the coaches have been for the Brooklyn Nets, right? So that part of it, you're like, well, but it feels really important to have that coach in place, to not maybe be cycling through guys to satisfy the elite superstar talent that you've drafted, because you feel like you're maybe screwing up his development. And there's been a lot of those discussions about how have they done with Cam Thomas. That's not a Jordi Fernandez thing, but it's an organizational thing. So when I use the Washington Wizards as the example, it's because they're top of the heap when it comes to tank odds. The Brooklyn Nets have a muddy track record with this as well. And that's where I struggle to be super excited about what Jordi Fernandez represents and what he's accomplished in his team. And we can get into some of the stats and how they've played more recently and why that's positive and optimistic, and just wanting to have the best players and trying to figure out the rest in the end. Remember, the Brooklyn Nets had the best players, and they had Steve Nash as a head coach, and then they had Jacques Vaughn as a head coach. And whatever the players' involvement or issues, whatever, they were not good enough coaches to get those players across the line. Whereas if you told me we had Jordi Fernandez, I think we would have been having a different conversation with those superstar talents in Brooklyn.
It sure feels like it. And it's an impossible thing to say, but it feels like there's more stability now in the coaching ranks. We always wondered what was sort of happening with some of these guys. I also sometimes wonder, like, these guys aren't exactly coachable at times either. And
course.
now
That's it.
guys like Kevin Durant kind of don't need to be coachable. They're like offensive engines on the among themselves, and he is the system, right? Like
Yep.
Kevin Durant is the system. So like, or James Harden is the system. Like that's just when you have those guys, the system is those guys, and you kind of just stand back and you're either like a great coach in an elevator and they really respect you or not. So it's like, it is hard to tell. It does feel like what we've seen from Jordi here. It's clearly he's better than those two other guys. Like that's,
Yes.
there's no debate about that. I think what we've seen from him system wise, buy-in wise, and just overall, just like sort of like understanding of like what they're doing on a night to night basis. And everyone sort of seems to understand it. I mean, clearly much more is happening with Jordi here than specifically Vaughn, probably Nash as well. Definitely Nash as well.
Yeah. And by the way, too, it's not even about the Jordi Fernandez impact on the superstars. It's Jordi Fernandez on the rest of the players, right? When you have a quality coach, to your point, Kevin Durant's going to do his thing. Kyrie Irving, James Harden, they're going to do their thing. It's about maximizing the value of everybody else, the supporting cast, the system you're running, so that you're giving defensive reps off on the other end because you have those guys playing the right way, playing at a high level. We talk so much about, the Nets look like they're really out there hustling under Jacque Vaughn. That's cool, but it also turned out like maybe they were like out of position a lot and they weren't fundamentally sound. This is even post a superstar era of the Brooklyn Nets. When you're going through these things, you just see a lack of functionality on a night in, night out basis. So I think we're in a good spot when it comes to Jordi Fernandez. I guess at a certain point, we just have to table the Nets are going to be where they are in the odds. We both agree they're not going to get they're not going to get the first, obviously. They're not going to get the second. They're not going to get the third. And it's going to be hard to get to the fourth. They're 5 wins ahead of Charlotte right now when you look at it, right? Charlotte has 2 more losses on the ledger. I think Charlotte has played 1 or 2 less games than Brooklyn as it stands right now. It's going to be hard to get there. Okay. So then what do we talk about for the final 30 games? It comes down to who are the young players on this roster? What are the developments that we want to see from them? And how do we ensure that whoever we get next year in the draft, in the multiple draft picks we have, you feel like you already have a couple of checks here? Because if you're not getting Cooper Flagg, then it actually kind of does matter that you feel good about a couple of pieces currently in the building, more so than if you're landing that elite talent. Let's just go ahead and knock something over because that's the kind of mode we're in, and come back on the other side here, thinking about expectations and players that we believe can be a part of that future. 30 games to go. We'll do that here in just one moment. All right, friends. I'm going to go ahead and refocus myself. I don't honestly even know what that was. I kicked something, and I'm not sure what it was or what possibly I've broken. Nevertheless, we forge ahead as true professionals. What are your expectations for these final 30 games? Do you think this team is willing to do a little bit more winning than even securing the 6th, knowing that we're definitely going to be the 5 or the 6 or trying to push for the 4? Is there a chance this team just goes out, hustles? Some of the numbers tell us they're playing better defensively, and maybe they just kind of muddle themselves to an interesting record by the end of the year.
I mean, the last 15 games or so, the defense has been pretty good. They're 8th overall in the NBA in defensive rating. I mean, some of these just like can be lumpy. They played bad teams during this time, so that is part of it. They get the Rockets a few times in there, but they like use the Wizards, the Hornets. They have some other bad teams just on the ledger, so it's not. If you look at these other teams, you're like, okay, OKC's in there. The Celtics are in there, but then like the Blazers are in there, right? Like,
but they do have the Clippers, they do have the Lakers, they do have New York, Phoenix. Like there are some big teams on there, but the bad teams.
Oh, the defense has been good. The defense has been good. I forgot. I shouldn't even have qualified it too much. Like the defense has been very good. Like Claxton's been playing better over the last couple of games. This is a group that specifically when Claxton and Zaire are on the floor, I think that's like really a big problem for other teams because they just want those guys can switch and they really get after, especially Williams. So I think there's like defensive soundness to this team. The offense is really going to still probably struggle. Cam Thomas is supposed to come back here. Like, so maybe that's an uptick. I'm kind of like, I don't know, like expectations wise. I mean, I'll be honest with you. They've already like well exceeded my expectations that I'm not actually sure if I should sort of like, if I need to readjust my priors or if I should just stick it where they were before and they've just been better sort of by hook or by crook. Like, I'm not really sure, like, because my priors are so embedded with the team being so bad, and that clearly hasn't been the case. But it does flummox me a little bit because, when they go on these long losing streak, you're like, oh, this is kind of what I thought. Here we go. This is what we all thought. And then they just win 4 of the last 5 or whatever. And you're kind of like, well, what the hell's going on? So I don't know if I am qualified to think about this correctly because because they're already so far past where I thought they were going to be, even without guys like Cam Thomas who sat out for long stretches, and they played like just total nobodies at times and been in games. So I just don't really. It's just very, very hard to tell, which is actually why it's a little scary. Like you could see a scenario. I mean, they're 4 games out of the play, and it's not going to happen. But
let's talk about it.
Like, it's not so crazy at this point, just because they're so far beyond it. I don't know. This is where it just gets very it's very murky for me. I just and mostly because, like I said, where I came into the season, I've had a difficult time resetting off of that, and I've been slow to the party for a while now.
Yeah, it's weird because I've had a very easy time getting. So we did this very early in the season. Jordi Fernandez, great. We feel super confident that he is going to be a great coach and he's right for the role. It's been harder to watch the players and to see, as you say, some of the wins and go, oh, like maybe there's something more here. And as you mentioned, one of the guys that's played better recently in Nicholas Claxton. I think sometimes there's those big pieces where you go, well, look at Claxton. I mean, he looks kind of a mess for a big portion of this season. On the one hand, that overshadows maybe some other successes. But the flip side of it is, right, Nicholas Claxton's playing bad, and the team is still getting some surprising wins. Cam Thomas has been out forever, and the team is still getting some surprising wins. And I without going through the record, their past record here, obviously having 18 wins at the moment, being 18-34, there is a part of me that does think about just Cam Thomas alone, nothing else. If there was 10 more games of Cam Thomas this year, is it worth maybe 2 more wins? You could probably go back and think about certain games where they just didn't have enough offense, maybe late game sequences, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden you're talking about 20-32. Like that alone would really start to shift your brain a little bit about what this team has accomplished to this point. And you said it there. Do I think that the Nets are, going to make some kind of run into the playoff? Of course not. But it's not that hard to be in the play-in conversation, right? Like, what was it when they did this 2 years ago with the Mikal Bridges version of it, right? You kind of flounder your way to it and you end up in the mix and nobody has any expectations for you, but you end up there. I can't take that entirely off the table here, especially if Cam Thomas comes back. I would say you have 30 games to go. Cam Thomas has to play 20 of them, 25 of them to say that, there could be a real needle move here. If he doesn't play for the next 10 or 15 games, then there's just not enough time to make enough gains there, regardless of the schedule. But I'm curious to get your feedback, but also there's a note here about the way the schedule breaks down late in the season that I think is going to be fascinating from a Nets standpoint relative to other teams in playoff standings.
I mean, clearly they'll be better when he comes back. They just gives them something they don't really have, which is guys who can consistently score. I mentioned where the team has been on defense over the last few games, 15 games. They're third to last in offense over that stretch too. Yeah. So the offense stinks. They don't have anyone that can play offense. They have D'Lo who can dribble. They have Cam Johnson who can shoot, and kind of nobody else can do anything all that consistently, which is what makes these wins even more amazing. It's the offense is so dreadful, but they just stick around in games, or they just pull some Houdini trick, or this some kind of mind magic on some of these teams. They played onto their level or something. I'm not really sure. Again, they lost a ton of games in there too. So I'm just maybe it's just looking at the recency bias. But Cam Thomas coming back clearly raises their floor no matter what. It's the one kind of guy they just don't have. The late end of shot clock, can get a bucket. Who cares that he can't play defense? It doesn't even matter for this team because what he does on offense is so much better than everybody else that he could probably sit down Indian style on the court and probably be better just because of how much he does on offense. You know what I mean? It's so clearly they're going to probably raise their floor just from having him back.
It's so funny. Okay, because there's probably more episodes. We want to get into some of the college guys we're keeping an eye on. There's going to be players we're going to talk about, Noah Clowney and the state of his game, all these things. But right now, the 9-10 matchup in the East is the 24-28 Atlanta Hawks against the 22-30 Chicago Bulls. And the Hawks just sent away stuff, and the Bulls sent away stuff. They're going the wrong direction here potentially. And the Brooklyn Nets are only 76ers, and then the Nets in the 12th position. Now, the one thing that I'll point out here, because I looked at the next 15 games, and I said, hey, if you said it 5.5 over-under record, I wouldn't be shocked about that being the number. The Nets do have 14 games remaining in their last 30 against over 500 teams, 19 against the East. One interesting one here is the Toronto Raptors, because they went and tried to add somebody. They only have 7 games against top 500 teams, but it's interesting to think about who's dropping ahead of you and who's coming up behind you. There's just this part of it where there's 2 teams ahead of them that might go the wrong direction. And if the Nets are playing hard and hustling and Cam Thomas comes back, other teams may just be getting out of their way. They may accidentally end up in a play-in game because of the way the trade deadline went and where these other teams are, though it's still hard to make up that gap, right? You can't just blink. The Atlanta Hawks is like a great example. You're not blinking and going, 24 wins versus 18 wins. That's a lot of ground to be able to make up. Chicago maybe feels a little bit different to me marginally at 22.
And I think the Sixers are going to keep trying. Embiid might be totally cooked, but they still, like, that team is going to desperately do everything they can to make the playoffs. Like, they're not going backwards. So just even like the Sixers and the Bulls swapping places probably makes the Nets safe, but I'm not really worried about that.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
I want to ask you a question. This is where I want to take this kind of episode for the final 30 games. What record in the final 30 games for you would be worth somewhat significantly falling in the draft standings when you talk about Tankathon? Like, 14th right now is 26-25 Phoenix, right? They're not going to get into those waters by the end of the year. But how far back are you? What's the record that you go, they proved something under Jordi Fernandez over these final 30 games where you stop looking at the odds in the draft and you just start going, wow, there's real value here?
You mean, is there like a number that I would be like,
they go 15-15. You go, hey, that means something. They went 500.
Well, so I'm the wrong person to ask because they're already there for me. So I don't know if my opinion would be changing except to be annoyed that you're given this like chance to get these guys. And like, this is kind of what you need to do. And it's unfortunate the system is set up this way. They've already proved it to me. I don't think there's like nothing. I don't know what more they could prove that like Jordy's the right guy. Guys buy into him. I actually think they could probably lose everything from here on out. And I'm not even sure my situation. I'm not sure how much I would pendulum swing back the other way on it just because how good. And there's no risk of that happening. So, I mean, I don't think there's like a win total on the high side that would change my opinion too much. But at the same time, that's because I'm just like already there. And at that point, the marginal gains on vibes don't feel worth it to risk. You have a chance to draft some like really good dudes this year, and you kind of don't want to fall too far out of it. So I don't know. I don't think it changes me. It's a good question. I just don't think that I think I'm already there in terms of being impressed.
Well, you know what? It's because I said 15-15 just to throw out a number at 500 basketball. That's pretty impressive. That would make them a 33-win team, right? Like, so while over that 30-game stretch being 500, you go, that's impressive. And you could think about if that had a value, but you're a 33-win team. And you never look back and go, remember that 33-win team? That never really resonates. I think, so I asked that question because I wonder about, as we'll talk about in future episodes coming up this week, I think about like a Noah Clowney. And if they won more games because Noah Clowney started showing something, additional, or started like taking over a couple of games, we're like, whoa, Noah Clowney has really jumped off the court here. Cam Thomas comes back and it combines to really, I don't know, look over the course of the schedule and you say, yeah, well, they turned around and they actually picked the Golden State Warriors one night, right? They had the San Antonio Spurs on the road and they got a win there. Like, which wins they would get that would have to happen for me to think anything different. I mostly agree with you. Like, I'm already so satisfied with what they've accomplished. You could just forfeit the rest of the games, try to get the best odds and move forward with it. But it is an interesting conversation if you're buying into these last 5 games and a 4-1 record, right? You have to at least consider the idea that this team may go out and keep winning basketball games and end up in that 30+ win range where you're like, okay, what did this all end up meaning in the end? And we may just be lamenting not landing one of those top guys in favor of development, in favor of vibes, in favor of that classic word.
Well, I'll tell you right now, this doesn't usually happen with drafts. And I'll tell you right now, we're going to talk about these college guys later.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, if the Nets don't draft, let's say the Nets don't pick in the top 3, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And any of those guys turn into stars, which one of them probably will, Nets fans will talk about this season forever. Because you don't think so?
Well, no. Yes, they will, unless the guy the Nets pick at 4 ends up being a star.
Oh,
right.
okay,
That's
fine.
the way
Yes.
it's okay. Right. That's the way it's
Okay.
okay. I know. But I know. Continue your point because it is the right one. It's the logical point.
Of course, if they actually draft the guy, then this is moot. But if they draft at like 7 and the person's just okay, the guy's just okay, let's say.
Yes. Yeah.
And Flag plus Harper plus Bailey, two of these 3 guys are just stars. Nets fans will never stop talking about it because unlike some of these other situations where it's like sort of unclear where you're going, there's a big contingent of fan base that wanted to spike these odds as high as possible, that 14%. And if it doesn't happen and everyone was pissed off about these wins, it's like this Giants with the DeVito thing. It's like,
of course.
You don't forget when you see Jaden Daniels marching down the field, one game away from the Super Bowl. I'll tell you right now, you do not forget the times that Tommy Lasagna or whatever got you in, whatever his name is.
Pasta lasagna. No, it's pasta.
Whatever. Yeah, like those games that they won, or that Drew Lock game. Like if they don't get, where they want to be in the draft this year, maybe that one's a little different, but you just don't forget. And now take that Giants example and extrapolate that over a whole season because the NBA just works a little differently. Yes, people will say, well, you never knew, but the fact that they didn't give themselves the best chance of doing it, Nets fans till they go to the grave will remember this season. I'm positive. So anyway, on that note, we'll get out of here.
And by the way, just real quick, it's like that is fandom, right? Like, and we talk all the time,
and they'd be right. They'd be right.
Right. Yeah. And they can be exactly. They'll be right. And the fans that are like, hey, these wins, it's okay. These wins are good. That can end up it can be right, but a lot more has to happen to justify it. And I think that's what's going to make these final 30 games fascinating.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Like I said last time, go sign up for YouTube and subscribe to YouTube wherever you listen. Wherever you listen to podcasts, but specifically YouTube so we can get to 8,000. If it means making a second YouTube account, you do it. You do it. This is what we do. Like,
can I add to that?
Yeah.
Make a third one. You can make a third one.
Let me actually add. Let me throw some out to
you. No, wait. Let me finish.
What about a fourth one?
Okay. And listen, I don't want to run long here. Let's get nuts. A 5th account. All right,
there you go. That's how you help the show. I'm gonna stop there because we're getting too crazy. All right, that's the number one way to help the show. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube.
I'm just gonna say Dwight Schrute, one of the all-time great poets. You can say it again for yourself, but we just did it. We knocked it out of the park with that. There, everyone should know those references.
Oh, is that that's the shelter? Like eating all
that's the volleyball. No, wait. How many people have to get hurt? 1, 2. Hold on. 3, 4. Let me finish.
There's another one where they go back and forth in the break room about how many days it would take. How many days it would take till he lets someone in.
What about 1,000 days?
Yeah,
how about okay?
On that note, one of the all-time great posts back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.